we're looking at 2.4, chain rule, select homework problems, and we'll start off with 102. We're given a couple of information about g of 5 and g prime of 5, and so just to kind of recap some of the rules that we've seen between 2.3 and 2.4. Product rule here. If we're trying to find the derivative of two functions that are multiplied together, we go through product rule that has this relationship or has this expansion. Quotient rule, if I have a function divided by another function, we go through quotient rule, f prime g minus f g prime all over g squared. And chain rule is for composite functions where we have a function within a function. So in this case, it's f of g of x. So notice that this is different from f of x times g of x. This g is inside the f. So this is not the same relationship as two separate functions outside of each other multiplied by one another. This is f of g of x. So if we have a function within the function, we go through this chain rule. And chain rule says take the outer function derivative first. So we find the derivative of f, but we keep the inside function intact and unchanged. And then once we take care of the outer function's derivative, then we multiply by the inside function's derivative. Okay. So A through D here, we have to first identify which rule that we're going to be using, and then we apply the rule. So for part A, if we look at, if we want to find the derivative for f is defined as g times h. So this is product rule relationship here. So we'd say f g prime h plus g h prime. So first function derivative times second plus second times first function times second function's derivative. So once we have product rule spelled out, replace every x with 5. Since with all these problems we're trying to find f prime of 5. Okay, replace every x with 5. So g prime of 5 times h5 plus g of 5 times h prime of 5. And all these values should be given to us, and we do have them. So g prime of 5 is 6. Okay, so g prime of 5 is 6. H of 5 is 3. G of 5 is negative 3. And h prime of 5 is negative 2. So 18 plus 6 gives us 24. So f prime of 5 is going to be 24. Okay. For part B, f of x equals g of h of x. Now look at A and B. These are not the same relationship, right? Here we have g of h of x. So this is h of x is inside the g function. We're going to go through chain rule. So chain rule says we're going to follow the form that we see here. So we take the outside function's derivative. So g of h of x becomes g prime of h of x times the inside function's derivative times h prime of x. Okay. Now, step by step, we're going to convert this away from, or we're going to get this out of function and derivative notation here. So first thing we do is replace every x with 5. So every x gets replaced with 5. So h of 5 here, h prime of 5. Okay. H prime of 5, we know what that value is, right? H prime of 5 is going to be negative 2. So replace h prime of 5 with negative 2. And from here, we're going to work from inside out here. So h of 5 first is going to be 3. So replace h of 5 with 3. And now, once we have 3 in place of h of 5, now we can evaluate this derivative. So g prime of 3 is now going to be, it's not given to us. So if it's not given to us, we have to leave this alone. That's g prime of 3. And we are unable to go any further beyond this. So this is going to be part of our answer here. So g prime of 3, we can't go any further. We're not given. It says if it's not possible, state what additional information is required. So we're going to leave the g prime of 3 alone. H prime of 5, we do have a value for that, so it's negative 2. So to find f prime of 5, it's going to be negative 2 times g prime of 3, or whatever g prime of 3 is. So this is as far as we can go with part B. Part C, f of x is equal to g of x divided by h of x. So this is, we have to go through quotient rule here. So g prime h minus gh prime all over h squared. Replace every x with 5, and then we make our substitutions. So each of the g prime of 5 and h of 5 are given. So we look at our givens, make all of our substitutions, combine our like terms, and we get 4/3. Okay, for D, we have f of x equals g of x quantity cubed. So notice that this is a chain rule relationship. All this expression is inside the 3, or inside the bracket with the 3 on the outside. So we can think of this as a chain rule here. Think of it as a function cubed. So if we want to go through chain rule, we start off with the outside function's derivative. So we bring down the 3. We keep what's inside the parentheses. Go through power rule, subtract 1 from the exponent. So now we've taken care of the outside function's derivative. The next step is multiplying by the inside function's derivative. So g of x's derivative is g prime. And now we have our derivative spelled out. Replace every x with 5, since again we're looking for f prime of 5. So replace every x with 5. 3 times g of 5 quantity squared times g prime of 5. G of 5 is given to us to be -3. Right, g of 5 is -3. Replace g of 5 with -3. Replace g prime of 5 with 6. Again, that's looking at our what's given to us. Right, g prime of 5 is positive 6. And then we have everything out moved away out of function notation. So 3 times -3 squared, 3 times 9 times 24 times 6 is 162. So f prime of 5 is equal to 162. Hey, 115. Let r of x equals f of g of x. Let s of x be f of g of x. Find r prime of 1 and s prime of 4. So for part A, we're trying to find r prime of 1. So r prime of 1 means that we first need to find r prime of x. To find r prime of x, we see that f and g are related to one another by composition. So g is inside the f. We have to go through quotient rule, chain rule to find the derivative. So outside function is f, the inside function is g. So following through chain rule is f prime of g of x, outside function's derivative, times the inside function's derivative. So as we take the outside function's derivative, we're going to copy everything. The inside function is going to stay unchanged for now. And once we take care of that, then we can multiply by the inside function's derivative. Replace every x with 1, since we're trying to find r prime of 1. So replace x with 1 here. So now we have to refer to our table to continue to find values for this. So let's start off with g of 1. So g of 1, so here's my g graph. G of 1 is going to be this point here. This point is 4, so replace g of 1 with 4. And then g prime of 1 is the slope of the g graph at 1. So here's my g graph. The slope at 1 is part of a flat straight line here. Notice that there's no steepness, there's no slope. The slope here is 0, so replace this with 0. So f prime of 4 should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should be 5 over 4, but and it is. However, 5 over 4 times 0, anything times 0 is going to be 0. So r prime of 1 is going to remain at 0. For part B, we're trying to find s prime of x. So let's look at the relationship for s of x. S of x is again a chain rule relationship, a composite function relationship. So we have f is inside the g now. So it's flip-flop from what we have with r of x. So before we can get to s prime of 4, we need to first get to s prime of x. To get to s prime of x, we're going to go through chain rule. So chain rule says outside function's derivative times inside function's derivative. So g is the outside function. The derivative for g becomes g prime. So g prime of f of x times the inside function's derivative. The inside function is f, so times f prime of x. Replace every x with 4. And now we can look at our graph here. So f of 4 is going to be at 5 over 2, so it's going to be 2.5 here. So, sorry, f of 4, yeah, 2.5. And the f prime of 4 we found from part A. Is the slope of this line segment. So if I choose 2 points and I find the slope, I'm going to go up 5 over 4. So replace f prime of 4 with 5/4. Now we need to find g prime of 5 over 2. So even though we found f of 4, we still have the 5/2 inside the g prime. So now we need to find what is the slope of the g graph at 5/2. So 5/2 is 2.5. So 2.5 is going to be right here between 2 and 3. So we want to find out what is the slope of the g graph at this point. So if I choose 2 points, if I want to find the slope of this line, I'm going to choose 2 points that I know the order pair for. I'm going to find the slope between these 2 points, because if I find the slope of this line, then anything that lies on this line is going to have that same slope. So from here, I'm going to go rise over run, up 1, 2, over 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 over 4 is 1/2. So replace g prime of 5/2 with 1/2. 1/2 times 5/4 is going to be 5/8. So s prime of 4 is equal to 5/8.